dealing with the contagion of 2020, we're all thinking about infections, sterilization, containment, and how do we keep ourselves and our homes and our loved ones safe from the contamination. This is a hot commodity right now. Can't even get this anywhere. Thinking about that kind of contamination, this was also the case in the first century when Jesus was preaching and teaching and healing. The understanding then was that Levitical laws about prohibiting certain foods and hand washing rituals, all these things were initially meant to keep the children of Israel, the Hebrew people, safe. To keep them safe, to keep them away from real contamination, germs, things they couldn't see that could give them harm, infection and illness. And what we should look at today is that we should see Levitical law as God's grace, giving directions for living in a world and a time before Lysol, refrigeration, and penicillin. It was how they survived. It was God's grace given to them so that they would be able to stay on the earth as a people. And these laws were practiced and passed down so that the Hebrew people, the children of Israel, would survive. But along the way, these laws and rituals kind of got tied into spirituality, as many things do. So the ritual became more than just washing up to keep one healthy and safe, but it got adopted into cultural norms, which would eventually lead to a place where it would identify separate groups and separate people. Identify these as the bad and these as the good. Not intended in Levitical law at all, but this is how the humankind ends up doing it. And seeking to help us see beyond this social stratification, Jesus comes into the picture in the gospel and puts ritual washings and dietary practices in their place. That's what these passages are about. Eating certain foods and not washing properly, while it could be unsafe at the time especially, and is unsafe for us now, we know we need to wash our hands. It's not the marker of a person's heart, though, is it? The heart of a person is seen, in Jesus' terms at least, by what comes out of their mouth. The heart of a person is seen by the behaviors that they display, and whether those behaviors sow love into the world or evil. And in keeping with this line of thinking, the Canaanite woman, a gentile, ritually unclean by virtue only of her birth, she comes to him and asks for a miracle. What a bold act. But the disciples want Jesus to send her away. See, they're triangulating the situation. He's in charge. They don't want her there. They say, Jesus, you need to send her away. And Jesus seems at first to just ignore her because he's giving them, the disciples, an example of what he has just spoken about. And by this encounter and the ensuing conversation, Jesus lets her demonstrate his original point. She knelt before him and said, "Lord, help me." He replied, "It is not good to take the children's bread and toss it to dogs." "Woman, you have great faith. It will be just as you wish." And right then her daughter was healed. You see, in this encounter, she displays great faith. And because of this great faith that she displays, she's no longer seen as unclean. And because of her great faith, she is no longer seen as not included, or indeed as a dog, which is mentioned in the passage. You know, I think when we go through stressful things like that, we all want someone to blame for the tough times we encounter. But in that, we do risk letting evil be what comes out when we try to blame, when we try to find the blame. And as we struggle to stay away from what might contaminate us, from a deadly virus, from continuing to spread it throughout our communities, and when we face the facts of our suffering economy and loneliness and people without resources, and when we see our families under this extra stress, we are unhappy being forced into this often unrecognizable new world we live in. And it's not biblical, but sometimes I try to tell myself it is what it is. Only in the instance to remind me that where it comes from and who is to blame is really less important than what we do about it now that it's here. And while we're living through this situation, it's testing us to see if we will come out as people of great faith. And we can choose to be like the offended Pharisees who separate people into categories. This is good and this is bad, and they have special Hebrew words for these things. Put people in groups based on arbitrary categories, and you can name them as well as I can. And treating people as objects and not people. Or we can choose to turn to wonder, to take each person for exactly who they are. And as they present themselves to us, listen and learn from what they have to share. We can trust one another. We can start from that place rather than starting from a place of judgment or objectification. We can be immediately dismissive due to our biases and prejudices, like those disciples. Or we can, with imaginative curiosity, give others the chance to show great faith, like this Canaanite woman did. The source of contamination comes from within. That's the ultimate lesson that Jesus from his own mouth is teaching in this example. And then, of course, lets the woman take it from there. So as we continue to go about our days, seeking to contain the contamination, sanitizing and staying home and being socially distant, let us remember to draw from a place of great faith. Not to categorize people and try to pin blame on whatever situation we're facing. but to accept what is for what it is and try to do something to make the world, how we find it with all its problems, a better place. I hope you will carry that message as you go about your days.